I think we're back. How's the lag now? Is it better?
I'm not sure if you can hear me. I can't hear you.
Oh, for Christ's sake. Silly thing.
So, testing, testing.
Testing, testing. Nope. Okay. I can hear you. Just a sec. Yeah, I can hear you. Aha, I see. Okay, let's try that. Can you hear me now? Hello? No? Okay, how about that?
Okay. There, that seems to be good.
This works?
That works.
Okay, all right. Okay. So I guess now I know what was going wrong in our game stream the other day. Apparently, Windows has decided to do an update, which means that I can't. It will not show your face unless I am on that screen. So I've got. It's a good thing that I have like half the screen on your face, and then the big screen in the background because I can still see the chat, but I can't be in my stream manager when I'm yeah.
I
Anyway,
see.
apparently they want me to install Edge. They're going to insist that I'm going to use Firefox instead. They can kiss my butt. But at least we're done with the lag. So, what did I miss?
I use Brave myself.
I should. Okay, I'm gonna double check and see what was missed in the chat. Anything that I need to address. Thanks for your
All
patience,
right.
guys.
Oh, not a problem at all.
Okay. Um, uh, you answered Barbarossa's question to some degree. You may want to elaborate on that. I don't know if you do now that we got voice back. Oh, now I hear me again. Oh dear.
Yes. Hold on. All right. Now,
Okay, yes,
let's see
Barb.
if I can. Yep, that's good.
We're good? Okay. Barbarossa asked, do you create fantastical or strange aspects of worlds, and how do you come up with them?
I do create both, and I ran fantasy games for a very long time, and some science fiction ones as well. And a lot of it for me begins on paper. I actually draw and create that way. So some of my creatures and some of my actual settings started as paintings or sketches or drawings.
Yeah, she does amazing art. She did the art for her book covers here. So, she's lucky in that she's one of these multi talented people. So, yeah, I imagine that drawing it helps to get a better visual of what you're trying to describe.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's see. Orc detective in the 1920s sounds fucking awesome,
It
Barbarossa.
does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would totally read that. Someone else who still uses paper says, I think it was, yep, Dazzlecat said that. Yep. Um, First draft issues are always a thing. First drafts are always shit. Don't worry about your first draft. Oh, hi, Natalia. I didn't see you. All right, I'm just catching up, but I'm almost done. Yeah. I agree with your comment there. The 1920s are a great era. Lots of grit and room for deco punk elements. That's very true. Um, Dazzlecat said, my story writing, though, is actually really old. Years of scribbling in notebooks that all got lost in a move, along with most of my D&D stuff, which is why I like World Anvil, because that will never happen to me again.
Well, I've got a ton of stuff in books and post-it notes and on the back of cards, and so
Yes.
wherever inspiration hits you.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to. Okay, so it looks like we're about caught up now, because that's the announcement there. Sable Aradia, do you know about the original works tagged for streaming? Yes, I do, but I am limited to the number of tags I can put in the listing. So I had to choose, and I had to. That was when I decided that was probably a lesser priority in this particular case, because we are talking about world building, and I'm not. Neither one of us are showing our work per se right now, so that's why I chose not to use that. Yeah. Moonflower says, I just went on my manuscript and opened up the document. Practice one. It has 3 words in it. Jesse hates parties.
That's a good place to start.
Yep. Well, hey, we immediately know. Actually, that's a very good first line when you think about it,
Yep.
right? Because you know the character, you know the dilemma, right? And you know
Yep.
something about the character. That's.
You've introduced the mood in one setting. You know the character's name.
Yeah.
And now you can start fleshing out the party and exactly why Jesse hates them.
That's excellent. Yes, that's a great first line. One of my favorites, and they now teach it in writing classes, is the gunslinger. No, the man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're like, okay, so now we've set up the dilemma. There's a chase going on. Somebody is being pursued. Who is the man in black? We have a mystery. Why is it that the gunslinger is pursuing him? Who is the gunslinger? Why the desert? You know, and yeah, it gets you asking questions, which is.
Exactly. And questions are what you want at the beginning because it's the fastest way to hook your audience and get people involved in what's going on. If you intrigue them right off the bat, you've got them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that too. Yeah. Moonflower is expressing dismay at her manuscript.
Actually, the parenting traditions of angels in the story could be a very good callback every once in a while. It's like, come on, I was raised by angels. And you would have this story that goes with it. And all you have to do is have catchphrases from the initial thing as a tie back. It would be quite funny. You could use it as a running joke. Unless, of course, it isn't a joke and they're very strict parents and everything is above board. But somehow I don't picture parent or angels as parents being a good thing.
Yeah, I have a feeling that doesn't work out well.
No, that would end up badly.
Why can't you just jump over this huge gap? Because I can't fly! Oh, right.
Lack of wings, solid temporal form, doesn't work. Fall down,
Oh
go
my god.
splat.
Yeah, that would be hilarious. Yes. Yeah. Or tragic. Horribly tragic. One of the two.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the conversation proper, since we now have this, we don't have the delay, which I wrote a story about that, by the way, right? And I've had trouble getting it published though, because I don't think people are getting what I'm trying to do. But it's called 3 Minute Delay, and it's about the difficulties created by, it's a mission to Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulties created by that lag in the conversation trying to maintain a relationship with your loved ones back home. So,
Yeah. And if there's a delay and a cutoff, and then the person starts talking again, you completely change the context of what the original part of the sentence was, which would be quite amusing too.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I'd love to see that actually.
Well, know what? You can read it. I'll send it to you. And you should tell me what you think. Maybe
Thank
you
you.
can tell me what I did wrong. I don't know.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Uh, we were talking about what you need to world build, how it's important to world build the area around your characters, and think about how it works, right? You need to know where the bathroom is, right? How does the
Yeah.
castle feed itself? What are your characters, your secondary characters, doing when the protagonist isn't around? Because they have their own life,
Hmm.
right? Oh, no, go
Just
ahead.
think about all right, consider yourself your main protagonist when you drop yourself on the map of your world, and it can be any world. Your friends are essentially important, but they are secondary characters in your story. But what do they do when they go home? They go home and they've got hobbies. They go on the internet. They do whatever it is that they do. Just be aware that when you interact, your character interacts with these characters, they might have something on the go at that moment in time. There might be a difference in things. They may have changed allegiance to someone else because of circumstances. Any number of things can happen that will cause ripples, but you have to foreshadow these ripples. And actually, you can use them to foreshadow greater ripples that they're unaware of. For instance, you have somebody who is a young knight or magic user in a kingdom where there's some unrest and there is actually a political coup going on, but nobody really knows what's happening because it's happening in the castle and nobody has that kind of viewpoint. However, somebody's been going around and soldier gathering, and your friend has been converted to this cult that is looking to take over the kingdom. So when you interact with your friend, after a while, you notice some very subtle changes, like they've started dressing in odd robes, they've adopted a new holy symbol, they're talking to you about joining this great group that they've got going on, and would you like some Kool-Aid? You know, it's there are so many ways to go about it to show you what's happening around you by dropping clues. And there's nothing a reader likes more than to be clever and to figure things out. Not all of it, but some of it, especially the sneaky stuff where they can go, oh my God, this is going on. What's going to happen next? And then they roll forward and they see what they are figuring out is actually starting to happen with some new things that surprise them.
I love that. I think that's an excellent point. One thing I try to tell people repeatedly is readers are smart. You don't have to spell everything out for them, and as a matter of fact, they won't like it if you do. They like it if you give them things to think about and chew on. I know I certainly do. And conversely, one of the mistakes that is often made is when you're in the process of writing something and you're interacting with your audience, which happens more and more in this internet age, sometimes people figure out what your ultimate big twist is. Changing it just because they figured it out is bad. It's bad
Mm.
writing, and it's not fair to the reader. And this is one of the ways in which I think Game of Thrones season 8 failed.
Yes, it failed massively because of that. You know, subverting expectations are one thing, but doing it because your readers and your viewers are clever is entirely the wrong reason to do it. You know, reward people for being smart, reward people for actually investing their time and their energy in your work and figuring it out, because it means they're interested. It means that they're engaged by it. These are your friends. These are the people that keep you writing. These are the reason you write. And I think that they forgot that in season 8 and season 7 and part of season 6. So
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, and this is why the huge backlash, right? Yeah,
yeah.
I honestly don't think that. Uh, okay, some elements. I believe, having read the books up to the point where they are published, I think that George probably does intend for Danny to become a big bad later on, right? But there's a lot of establishing of that has to happen between book 5, which is where I am, and book 7 or 8, which is when it's going to happen. I think he will make it work. The writers did not. On the other
Mhm.
hand, I don't think he has any intention of things unfolding with Arya being the one to kill the Night King like that.
Oh, that was such a travesty. It really was. I liked the character Arya, but that was absolutely the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. For many reasons. But yeah, absolutely. I actually my suspicion is that George R. R. Martin wasn't expecting the books to take off quite the way they did. And what's happened with all of the pressure and press and people um, shipping romances and, you know, giving him sort of ideas and badgering him along is that they push him into a corner and he's not going to write it.
I hope you're wrong, but I do see the pressure, and I definitely think that that is exactly it. I know for a fact he wasn't expecting it to take off like it was, because I've seen lots of interviews, right? And he talked about the fact that he figured his career in writing novels was basically done. He had a novel called Fever Dream that he put out after Wild Cards, and it tanked, right? And
Hmm.
that's why he got into writing for television. And that's where that wonderful series Beauty of in the Beast came from, which was
Oh, yeah.
amazing, right? But then he's like, well, I've got this idea, and he wrote it and he managed to sell it, and then yeah, it kind of blew up. And yes, when you have a million people, telling you you should do this, I'll be really mad at you if you don't do that, etc., etc., it makes you rethink. Oh, and the backlash against some of the things in the series, some of it
Hmm.
was what he intended, some of it was
Hmm.
not what he intended, right? And what he intended, now he's probably rethinking everything, and that, I can't imagine the kind of stress that that would
No,
create.
I can't either. So, in that respect, you know, my heart goes out to him. It would be nice to see a conclusion to the series, but I'm also prepared to kind of extrapolate from the books where things likely would have gone and
Right.
be create a happy ending from that, or as happy as you possibly could in that universe.
Yeah, yeah, and that's possible. We have to accept that that's a possibility. Writers are human, and
Hmm.
I don't know what I would do under that kind of pressure. I might explode. I have difficulty when I have one of my beta readers who's really devoted going, I hate that. I have to rethink that myself. But
I curl up in a ball and cry usually. And then I
yes.
go back and coax Nash out from under his desk and get him to get back out and make snarky comments.
Yep. Yeah, I generally write a comedy scene after that point to cheer myself up, is what I do.
Yes,
Yeah, that gets
or a
him.
tirade.
Yeah, or a tirade. That's another good one. Or a murder spree. I've done that.
Yep, so have I. A missing chapter, actually.
Ooh. Oh damn! Now I gotta read the missing chapter. Okay, Barbarossa says, interestingly enough, George R. R. Martin had said that when the series had reached season 3 or 4, that John would kill the Night King, and the writers never followed through. Yeah, see, I believe that
Yeah.
that's exactly what is supposed to happen too. Everything's been set up like that in the story. That's the development. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, subverting expectations is one thing, right?
Hmm.
But spitting in the face of your intelligent audience is another, right? So,
Yes. And adding the time factor of 8 years to it. Yeah,
yes,
that's like insult to injury.
yeah, absolutely. And Angst Hayes, yes, Beauty and the Beast with Vincent in the Sewers, that is the series that I am talking
And
about.
it was brilliant.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so most of the people that I interact with in my audience tend to do a lot of world building. They create, like, there's World Anvil will have challenges that'll ask you to think about things. Like the most recent one was an alcoholic or non-alcoholic drink that is culturally important on your world, right? Maybe
Oh.
you've never thought about that, right? So it'll get you thinking about things sometimes that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about.
Hmm.
They also talk about something they call world builder's disease, right? If you're talking about the styles of elven shoes, you've probably gone too far. So the
Hmm.
question is, how much world building is too much? Where do you stop?
I find for myself that a lot of the what I call the detail or fussy work, which it would be elven shoes in this case, are things that I do in my spare time to keep me energized with the actual story itself. Having these details, knowing what's in my the closets of my characters is one of those kind of things that makes me happy. It's a guilty pleasure. But it doesn't mean that I have to share all of that with my readers. What it means is that when Nash goes to get dressed, I know what is in his closet, I know why it's there, and he'll always pick the same thing anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's just, it's it's like developing an entire section of your world, even though the characters are only going to ride through it. So they're going to stick to the path. They're not going to go into the forest at all of this. You know what's in there. You know what type of birds are in that place. You know what makes it real, because it has to be real to you when you're writing it to feel real to the people who are reading it. You can convey all of that if it's in you, because you can talk about the bird song that's in the air, or the scent of whatever flowers are blooming just out of view, or the leaves that are falling because it's this particular season and what color they are. Hello, kitty. And sorry, I'm a climbing post occasionally.
Uh-huh.
So these things are important to world building. The trick is to not go quite as far as Tolkien did, unless you're writing books like the Silmarillion, which are essentially in-depth books on your world. Um, some people really, really love that kind of detail. Save it for bestiaries, save it for atlases, save it for, exploring town scenarios, stuff like that, and release it on the side as sort of like an extra to your novels. So people who get interested in your worlds can learn more about things about your worlds. But keep it as research for yourself initially. Like, I have an atlas planned for my book. I've got a sketchbook planned for my world. And actually, I have a release date for my sketchbook for patrons, at least, for the end of this
Yes.
year. And it may have to be bumped into early next year just because of everything that's going on. But these are all things you can do to keep yourself motivated in your story, to learn more about your world, and to make it more real inside yourself.
I agree with you. I don't think anything is too much as long as it's giving you that sense of realism. But yes, I don't believe you have to convey it all to your readers. Something that was once suggested to me, and I find it very good advice, is rather than do an info dump, pick three major details and describe them.
Hmm.
Use them as kind of metaphors or, examples of what it is that you're trying to convey.
Yes. But if you have the information inside yourself, you can pick the three details that tie everything together as well. Describe them accurately and fairly succinctly, or even the way the character interacts with them, and you will get the sense of what they are, how they place, and why they're relevant. Immerse your character or immerse your reader in the story a little bit more, and then carry on. And essentially, what you've done is you've handed them the jacket that your character is wearing, and they get to put it on at the same time.
And that's awesome. By the way, Jen does something which I think is incredibly smart, and that is that she has a merch store. And her merch store sells stuff that would exist in her world. She has, for example, they're everywhere and they're called Vendomat, right? Everything is available out of a vending machine, right? So she's
Yep.
got Vendomat mugs and the whole bit.
And
It's
t-shirts for Vendomat technicians, uh, which I do
oh,
actually.
cool.
I went and ordered one just to do a product sort of test. Can't really see it too well,
Oh,
but
yeah, you can. There you go. Vendomat
yeah,
t-shirts.
yeah. If you want to be a technician of a Vendomat and it is a deluxe job, then you too can have the t-shirt. Um, but yeah, merchandise is another great way to connect people with things, especially if it is something tangible, or at least, an image that ties into the story on a t-shirt or on something else. Like, what? A pencil bag. For those of us who still draw on paper, um, you could get a pencil bag. Or you could keep goodies in it. It fits a cell phone, it fits probably a small tablet, any number of things. But
Yeah.
Have things designed to go with your world.
What are the job requirements? Angsthaze asks. And Daz says, I need that. Don't worry, we will provide merch links. We will do that.
Yes, a dice bag. And I will be doing things like dice bags because I'm developing this into a role-playing system as well. So it's the job requirements for it are simple. You need to be able to sit comfortably on the floor. You need to be able to operate tools. You need to know what certain discs looks like. You need to actually memorize a few codes, but you do have a code book with you in case you have to reference it. And it's a good job. It's an inside job. Vendor mats are never outside. Generally, people are happy to see you show up because they're hungry and they're cranky because they want their stuff. And if you're there, that means the stuff's going to happen really quick. So good job. Pays good too.
Yes, remember that this is in her, corporate dystopian cyberpunk hell, right? Good jobs are hard to find.
Exactly. And you'd be working for one of the wealthiest people there, who, by some standards, would be my main antagonist, but you don't have to worry about that. He does pay.
Exactly. Moonflowers, Eggstaze says, darn, is unqualified. Daz says, yeah, job with a pocket cheat book, exactly. Moonflower has a question. You know the whole Jesse hates parties opening line. How do I actually write that if the party is not the beginning of the story? Well, then that shouldn't be the first line. You should talk
Or,
about the party. Or you should have him grouching about a party that he didn't go to or something.
or he could have just received an invitation to a party that he can't get out of.
There's that.
And it's going to happen in 2 weeks, so he's got 2 weeks to brood on it and hate it even more.
Yeah, exactly. The party happens after the beginning. Well, yeah, have him anticipate how awful the party's going to be, and that will get your reader going, uh-oh. And now the reader's like, okay, now I gotta find out what happens at this party.
Exactly. All of the projections that go on about, why they're going to hate the party in advance of the party. It's like, oh, so and so will probably be there. And oh, they always hog all the such and such. Then they hang on my arm and talk to me for hours and hours as they get drunker and drunker. And it's really annoying, and somebody else is going to be there and they always overdo the perfume and it's just obnoxious. And there won't be enough bathrooms and, nobody will leave me alone or whatever the scenario is for Jesse. If Jesse likes to be by themselves, it's like, oh, damn, their cat died and I can't just go make the excuse to go and talk to their cat. So it's, there are all sorts of different directions you can take it in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. I'm a little scattered now because I was so stressed and frustrated. I actually get pretty anxious about these kind of things. I realize that I look like, I do this all the time I do, but I still get anxious about it because I am an introvert. And now I'm like kind of lost as to I had a bunch of questions that I was gonna ask and now I forget where I was. Um Uh-oh. Moonflower says I'm just in turtle screaming because I just realized I don't know where the story starts. Well,
Then write what first pops into your head and don't worry about it. Just write.
yeah, exactly.
You don't have to begin the story at the beginning. You can sort that out later. What you do is you write what comes to you first, and then you go from there. And all the other details will eventually fall into place. So just relax, don't worry about it. Write something that engages you. Sorry, that was my sweetie.
Bless you, George.
Bless you, George.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, that does actually give me. I remember now what I was going to ask, which is, what are some of the tools that you use to help flesh out your world for yourself? Right. What are your tools of world building?
Oh, music. I'm a big fan of a whole bunch of different types of music, and I find music really inspirational. And often I'll sit here with a page open to type, and I'll put on something that has a particular ambiance to me, whether it sets a theme, or it feels like something that would happen at a club, or it's something corporate in sort of tone or jungly like the Seep. I'll sit there and I'll start picking elements out of it, whatever inspires me. And it's usually a feeling that I go with first. And it's like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Well, oh, the weather is rainy. It's the Seep. In my world, rain is acidic. And it's for, the atmosphere is dangerous to humans. You can be out in it for maybe a day, but you're going to sustain some damage. And if you're staying out later than that, you're probably going to die. But you want to get some ambience, you can find all sorts of different things that set the tone for you, and then you can start going. You might find something that's an excellent theme song for a character, and it's like, well, why is it a good theme song? You sit there and you listen to it, you get a deeper sense of who that character is and why they like the song, or why it's applicable. They might not like the song, they might find it too angsty or something. Another thing, images. I love documentaries. I love watching things on TV that are like cutting edge technology being developed, or things on nature, exploration of space, anything that gets you rolling or inspires you in that respect. I'll even, when I'm sitting and I'm reading someone else's extremely good book, looking at you there, Diane. I've had ideas based off of your book. And it's like, oh,
Cool.
that's a really good idea. That's very insightful. I'm going to file that one away for when I'm writing the prequel to my particular series. So there you go.
Totally guilty as charged, by the way. I do that too. And yes, I have done that with your books, as a matter of fact.
Well, thank
Especially
you.
character wise, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, no, I get that. So yeah, because like you said, Nash and Chandar have a lot in common.
Hmm.
So no, that's cool. I agree with you. Music's very important to me too. I generally make playlists for my books. I used to do it on cassette tapes, then I did it on MP3 downloads, now I do it on YouTube, right? And I'll make the playlist and sometimes never listen to it again, right? Like
Hmm.
I wrote this horribly depressing post-apocalyptic story, and I cannot listen to that playlist now without getting depressed, so I'll save that for the next horribly depressing post-apocalyptic story.
I hear you. I'm on Spotify and I've got playlists of the Gazunga for different things. And there are some that I listen to all the time, and there are others I haven't listened to for 3 or 4 years. And it's just, it depends on where you need to be. And that's the fastest way to get me, at least, into a mood.
Yeah, actually that's really cool that we share that process. It's interesting,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, I'll also make, like, I've done where I've made book trailers for
Hmm.
things that I found difficult to visualize, and often I'll do it with it's a genre called machinima, for those who are unfamiliar, where you take little bits of like popular video games or popular movies or whatever, and you put it together to tell a different story, right? So
Hmm.
that's exactly what I've done with that, and I did it not to advertise my books per se, but more to give me a sense of what it would look and feel like, right?
Hmm.
So, World Anvil obviously is a big tool that I use because I've been trying to do what World Anvil does naturally for years. I tried to make
Hmm.
a blog that did that. I tried to make websites that did that. So that helps me to put it all in like wiki entries. And I think that's fun in that I'm finding that it draws people into my universe. They start seeing the stuff about the elven shoes, and then they get interested and they, go, well, what's this about? So these are,
Exactly.
yeah, these are all things that I do. Angst Hayes has a comment that you and I are both going to chuckle at regarding your acid rain, which is better than threadfall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have a scientific reason for why it's acidic.
Yes, this is cool. She's not shared that in the text yet. I don't really know, but she knows. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yep. I
Um,
know why things are the way they are, and they're going to stay that way, even if really clever people guess.
that's excellent. Good. Good. Yes, I agree. Right. Siobhan says, "Oh, I like Time Team because of the historical aspect of it and the experimental archaeology." Speaking of things that inspire you in your writing,
Oh, yeah.
I watch a lot of war films and war series and stuff like that to get the feel of my war. because it's also Age of Sail type technology, I read Horatio Hornblower and the Aubrey Maturin series,
Oh,
and
that was a brilliant series.
yeah, it's one of my favorites. I
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, definitely strong influence. And because it's also a bit space opera, I read things like the Vorkosigan Saga and
Hmm.
the Honor Harrington books, right? So
Yeah.
to get me in the mood, depending on that, right? Yeah, Siobhan agrees. Playlist for books, games, and almost anything else. She says, speaking of playlists, the Who Band has a cool song out with another singer called "The Song of Woman." I'm sure we have both heard it. We're both Who
Yep.
Band fans.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, they're amazing.
they are. They feature on many of my playlists.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking. So, what music do you like? She's like Mongolian metal. I'm like the Who Band. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. I like that element of Tibetan and Mongolian throat singing
Hmm.
and Tuvian. Like there's a bunch of different cultures that do it, right?
Hmm.
And I really like it because for me that kind of noise just makes me think of orcs, and I've often put that stuff on my orc playlist, right? Just because of the tone.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of Kodo drummers.
Oh
I just
yes,
and that does it for me, and that really sets the tone for a couple of the cultures that I have going. And it's you'd be surprised at which cultures have a very strong drum kind of love, and that's the only way to really put it, because they aren't the ones you would think they are.
yeah, no, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Yeah, I love it too. So yeah, more orc music by my
Yep.
strong drums. Oh, and my Nunnehi elves. So
Oh yes.
yes, amazing stuff. Yeah. Um, let's see. Now we've talked about kind of what you need to do, and we've talked about the tools that we use. What's your favorite part of world building? What do you like the best about it?
I like all of it. I don't think I could actually isolate any of it. I love drawing maps, and yes, I hand draw my maps. Um, I love creating landscapes. I have, you know, fortunately reset up my art studio again, and I've got all of my art computer stuff done, so I
Cool.
can get started on things. Um, for me, it's a very sort of tangible, hands-on. I like to create what I'm actually seeing in my head, writing down traditions and like backgrounds for characters. And I did this when I ran games too, but it was anything that saturates me in the world and connects me more to it and helps me understand it more, or surprises me. And often there are surprises, um, is what I love to do. So if I'm having a block as far as writing goes, if I'm sitting there and Nash doesn't want to talk to me or the other characters have nothing to say, I'll go and do something else relating to it and get re-inspired. Sort of, it refreshes absolutely everything, and then everybody else wakes up, they feel like they've had a bit of a sleep, and they come back to work.
I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I guess many writers can relate to that whole idea of the characters won't talk to me right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's how you do it. You get back into visualizing what they're doing and what they're interacting with, and yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. We were talking about pet peeves in world building, and you said one of the things that you really hate is that people don't consider the infrastructure. Would that be an accurate?
Yes, that is a pet peeve. And Tolkien, surprisingly enough, was really guilty of it, because if you look at his world and you look at all of the major edifices and cities and whatnot, how do those people get their food? Where is their water? Where do they stable their animals? Where are the common folk that would do the weaving and, any of the forging that they might need? How are their weapons produced? What, is it all magically created inside the like core part of the city? I don't think so, because it's not that kind of structure. You would have infrastructure. Just think about what happened in medieval times. Sure, you'd have a castle and a keep, but surrounding that, you would have, your merchants, you would have the people who do the trade, you'd have livestock, you'd have taverns, you'd have things that actually brought economy to maintain the castle, as well as foodstuffs. And on the outside of that, you would have a lower wall that was at least defensible. Outside of that, you would have your farmlands. And those would go on for miles and miles, because you had a ton of people living inside the castle and the surrounding area.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I also think that in some cases, artists' portrayals have made it even worse. Like, it struck me how utterly undefensible Gondor was, right?
Yes, exactly. That was the thing. Even Game of Thrones ran into that. Like Winterfell. Oh my God. Okay, you guys, you're a northern climate. Where's your food coming from?
They get into it in the books much better, I have to say.
They they do, but you would still have something. You would have some indication. In the very short span of time that they had to grow things, you would have people out there doing something with it, because you had small folk. Not everybody is a warrior. Not everybody is maintained within the castle itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there.
And the same thing in any sort of space opera or science fiction. It's like, not everybody is captain of a starship. Not everybody owns a transport. Those things are expensive. Even in Firefly, Mel, you got to see that they were struggling, that they had
Yeah.
to be sneaky in how they got their food, but you saw how they did it. It made sense. They had to get supplies, they had to pay for things. It was explained in that, in a passing way, but it was at least explained.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you don't have to delineate the details, but you do have to give the reader a feel about how it's done and that it is happening. I agree with that.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. My big pet peeve is related, but not exactly the same. Mine is failure to consider natural consequences. Right.
Oh,
In that,
yes.
if you're going to introduce faster than light travel, that changes society. How does
Hmm.
it change society? How much does it change society? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe faster than light travel is so expensive and it's only available to a certain elite group that most of the rest of the universe just goes on like it always has. Maybe there's a distinct, like a real caste difference between the people who are traveling in space and the people who are, still farming, because you still gotta farm, because you still gotta eat, right? So
Yep.
but
Funny you should say that.
oh,
Yes,
yes, in the far future, with all the teleporters and the faster than light travel, we are still going to have farmland, and if we don't, we're going to die.
exactly. Even vendomats need to be refilled.
Oh, I see, we're getting to a plot point here. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. uh Dave Drive, dangerous and very expensive. Yes. Awesome. Yes. There's a nerd comment. That's great.
Yep.
Siobhan says bad guy getting away can have dire consequences. Yes, it's another thing that people often fail to consider, right?
Yep.
You know,
It's true. Your protagonist slighting somebody can have dire consequences.
yes. Yes, and it's amazing what will slight people, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes your character's done nothing wrong, but that person is used to having deference from everybody around them, and your character doesn't do the deference thing, so now they're like, out to destroy them, like that's a thing.
Exactly. Or if your protagonist is started off fairly humble beginnings and whatnot with a couple of good friends, and as things take off, they're starting to become more in demand. They're starting to have to do things. They don't have the same kind of time for their friends. There may be resentment. There may even be a turning point where the friend who feels that they were there through thick and thin is getting the short end of the stick.
Yep.
So it's, consequences. And I love consequences. I think there are consequences in life. And if it follows life, if your book has any sort of tie into reality at all, there will be consequences for all actions.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to introduce something fantastical, especially with speculative fiction, consider how it changes your society, because it will. I mean, this is something that really kind of bugs me about a lot of epic fantasy. Okay, if there's still a feudalism, why?
Hmm.
We have magic. How available is the magic? I mean, you could look at it two ways. Maybe magic is only available to the rich and powerful, right? So now we have mageocracies instead
Hmm.
of, the traditional warrior based feudalism that we know. That's fine, right? But if magic is commonly available to the populace, there ain't going to be any feudalism, because there was a peasant rebellion going on at every moment somewhere in Europe from the beginning to the end of the feudal era.
Exactly. You've just given people the power to be autonomous. They don't have to fit into the structure anymore. Their survival isn't dependent on the king sending out troops to defend them from any of the ravaging hordes that happen to trample through their lands. They have magic, they can defend themselves. What do they need to, be tithing to the king for?
Yeah, exactly, right. And
Yeah.
if there are, if one of the ways in which you're limiting magic is that only a limited group of people can do it, um, and they're persecuted, okay, that's legit. But then how is that persecution taking place? In a medieval technology setting, that's much more difficult. I'm not saying it's not impossible. It's impossible, because it is possible. Numbers will defeat anything eventually, right?
Yes.
So you have enough people, you can take down a mage eventually. He can't blow them all up, but um, I mean, you need that, right? Now, in a more urban fantasy or futuristic setting, you have a lot more options available, because technology can often be the leveling ground with magic, right? So you should think about that, right?
Hmm.
I think you underestimate
Consequences.
a culturation. Yes, sorry. Yes, you have a point there, angst. But then again, if a culture, like if a culturation gets started, in that you're training a particular group to think a certain way so they won't do X, which does work very well, then how did it get started? It
Hmm.
started from something. And if it's a matter of oppression, then the group that is being oppressed had to be at a disadvantage at the start of whatever that was, in some way. Am I right?
Oh, yes. No, I totally agree with you on that point. And if you're dealing with a humanoid species, anything with human based emotions, there will be that under sort of pinnings of resentment that will eventually boil up and cause some sort of rebellion or forced change.
Right. That's very true. I do agree with you there, Angst. Right? Angst says if you are a high magic peasant in a feudal society, you'll think hierarchically and want to become an elite, not destroy the
Mm-hmm.
elites. That's true if magic suddenly appears at the beginning of the feudal era, right? But if it's always existed, how did we get to feudalism, right? But
Mm-hmm.
maybe one of the ways in which we got to feudalism is that the magic elite established themselves as the ruling class, which is entirely possible. No, I agree with you there. I think you're absolutely right. And I think
Yep.
that that's another flaw that I see a lot. If you're writing a medieval society, people should think like people from the Middle Ages, and we shouldn't be okay to an extent. We have to balance, because there are some things that were just fine in the Middle Ages that are not okay now, right? But and the modern reader will be alienated if you go into it, but to a large extent they have to think like people in the Middle Ages. I think that Martin does this really well, but I've read a lot of writers that don't. Yeah. Hey, Song, nice to see you. Yes, just if you're just joining us, and I might as well do this because we're about halfway through the stream. This is my friend J.I. Rogers. She is the author of the Corpse Files series, which is a dystopian cyberpunk space opera, which I absolutely love these books, by the way. I'm a big fan of this series.
Thank you very much.
She is a multiple award-winning author. Uh, I don't know if I should get her to list it all. I know recently she was the winner of the Chanticleer International Book Award for Science Fiction, which is awesome. So, and she's my friend, and she lives like in Revelstoke, but we never see each other. Revelstoke's actually like an hour and a half drive from where I am. So, but especially with COVID now, we don't go anywhere.
No, but we have this, so we can actually converse more often.
Yes,
Now
and
that I'm all set up, we can do this.
this is great. I would really
Yeah.
like to do that. This is cool. I just got back in touch with my friend Sarah Berman too, right? And it's the same thing, right? She moved
Hmm.
and she had to get set up, and I invited her to come do an interview. And yes, now we're talking more, and I would really love to do that. That would be
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Darth Nicholas, good to see you. Welcome. Yes. And congratulations on your raffle win. I don't know what you won because it was all a big secret. It's a big special thing, but I'm thinking maybe it might have been one of those. Oh, you don't know what you won yet. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm thinking that it might have been one of those limited lifetime grandmaster level memberships to World Anvil. I don't know if it was, but they said it was like this big special thing, and then they rolled this out. So I'm thinking it might be right. And hey, honey, good morning. You're up. He wasn't when I started the stream, so that's cool. Right. But yes, if I were not already an Inner Sanctum member and liked the perks, I would go for that in a second, by the way.
Hmm.
So, yeah. Daz says, yes, if you have feudalism, there is always the weight of the church or temple that may or may not contend against science and magic. Yes, that's
Oh,
a very
yes.
good point. Religion can be a marvelous way to control your populace and make them think a certain way so that they'll behave in a certain manner.
Only takes 3 generations.
That's cool. Elaborate on that. What do you mean by that? It only takes 3 generations.
All right. The If you say people who were alive in World War One, how many of them are around right now, and how many generations have happened since then? Well, it's been more than 3. But even by the 3rd generation after World War One, you were dealing with people who were just coming out of World War II, and they were forgetting about what had actually happened. It's okay. The best analogy I have is what I call sort of a grandparent kind of thing. Your grandparents build a store. They invest all of their time and all of their energy and all of their essences into it. And it means something to them. It means something to their kids because the kids were involved in it to a lesser extent. They understand the work that went into it and whatnot. However, when the grandkids come along, it doesn't mean quite the same thing because they weren't involved in it as much. It's more of a cash cow. In the case of if you want to erase a belief system or knowledge or history, all it takes is 3 generations. You have the people who remember it, prevent them from teaching it, make it illegal. Then you have the generation that are brought up by people who were involved in it but can't say anything about it. So it's not discussed, it's not in the consciousness. By the time those people have children, it's gone from the consciousness. It no longer exists. Anything related to it are gone. Chances are their grandparents are gone. So there is no connection to it anymore. It's not tied into the consciousness. That's what I mean by it.
That's amazingly insightful. And I agree with you. I see that. I also think that it happens inadvertently sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm seeing this now. When I was a child, when you were a child, because we're about the same age, right?
Yep.
When we were children in school, they would get people to come in and talk to us about World War II, right? They would get people who were, or we'd have grandparents who
Mm-hmm.
were involved in World War II, and they would tell us about war and about the horrors of it, and they would tell us about fascism, and they would tell us about, you know, concentration camps, right? Like they had concentration camp survivors come in and speak to us, right?
Yes.
And it made it real to us. We listened and we heard, right? Then we grew up and our kids grew up and the school system stopped doing that. And in part it's because people started dying off, right? We don't
Hmm.
have a lot of World War II veterans around anymore. You know, we don't have a lot of direct concentration camp survivors around anymore. So it's already fading from the consciousness. Now I've found, here we are, fascism is rising again. And I find it absolutely stunning that people don't recognize it for what it is. But they
Hmm.
don't. They honestly have never been taught about it, so they don't know what they're seeing. And I find it very distressing, like really
Yes.
distressing, especially since one of the big things that they were talking about after World War II, why so many things, why, you know, and World War One, you know, why the poppies, why the rituals of remembrance, why the Shoah project, all these things,
Hmm.
right,
Yep.
was so that we would never forget, and we've already forgotten.
Yep. Well, it's true. And if we can forget that in under 100 years, what else have we forgotten?
Yeah. I think this is also why we
Yeah.
can't seem to get our shit together on climate change.
Nope.
Shout out, E Songbird is amazing. I would agree with you, Barbarossa, and thank you for the hydrate check.
Hmm.
I can't do it right now though because I am out of coffee and I didn't want to take another break for some time. But I will at 3 o'clock. We'll take another break briefly and then go do whatever needs to be done. Yeah, and thank you, and then I will do that. Fahrenheit
I
451 brings
Oh
up
yeah.
Daz. Yes, a good illustration.
No, I in regards to not talking about their time in World War II. Yeah, I know a lot of veterans wouldn't discuss it. They were involved in one or both wars. I had relatives in both, and they didn't really want to talk about it. And it was actually by proxy that I got to have an experience of it. And an older friend of mine, his father had been captured in Hong Kong during like the when the Japanese invaded, and he was taken to a Japanese prisoner of war camp in Japan at the beginning of the war, and he lived there. And
Right.
he kept a journal and he wrote down all of his experiences and what happened. And when, according to my friend, when he went over, he was an artist. He was a sensitive man. He was very careful. When he came back, he was broken. He was an alcoholic. He was angry and vicious. But the journals that he kept, the account that I read, explained exactly how he was broken and why and what had happened, what a travesty it was.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing isn't taught. And it's something I think people should have in the consciousness to understand that these things do go on and can repeat.
Genocide is distressingly common. We think about it around World War II. We think about it in terms of recent genocides, but there have been a lot. Genocide happens. It's I don't know, really horrifying when you realize how often it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in large part it's because these lessons keep getting forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And people don't want to look at what's uncomfortable.
That's also true.
So, like, I lived in Africa in the early six or late 60s, early 70s, and then again in the late 70s. And in both cases, things went on there um, that we heard about, but no one else did. So we were in Tanzania when Idi Amin entered Uganda, and we were in Kenya when he exited. And he actually was deposed and run out of the country. And no one ever heard about the stuff that was found in the basements of the palaces. And he would have political opponents or people he just didn't like murdered, and there were body parts in freezers because he
Wonderful.
was a cannibal.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
nobody heard that, but it was all over the front page in Kenya because it was news. You know, the genocide in Rwanda, all of these things still go on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty horrible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, what we can do to each other. I read a book called The Long Way Home, which was about a child soldier in one of these, who was in Africa, who was, forcibly recruited during that time. And it's pretty horrific
Hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
right? But I read it. And the reason why I read this stuff is so that I understand. Well, okay, I think I started reading it initially because I don't understand why people do horrible things sometimes, and I wanted to because they do them.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, I mean, okay, um, it's a conceit in the literary world that everybody has reason for everything they do. Antagonists are the heroes of their own story, yes. But there's also a certain pushback against people just being evil for the sake of being evil, right? And
Hmm.
I actually think that that's a mistake. People often are evil just
Hmm.
because they like
Yes.
being evil.
Oh,
So,
I quite agree. And there are lots of examples of evil for evil's sake.
yeah, exactly.
And then there are examples of people doing evil because they believe it's their only recourse.
Much more common that.
Yeah. But no,
Yeah,
there is evil in the world.
yeah. E. Songbird said in regards to the forgetting of fascism and concentration camps and all these things, and then those terms get used around without the same or with the same amount of fear mongering, without the context, and I don't know what you meant by definite united, but I'm sure that was your spell check or something. Definitions without the context and definitions. Original, maybe, I don't know. Ironically, this
Hmm.
allows the things that people are afraid of to happen easier. Yes, because it minimizes it. When you say, look,
Hmm.
that guy is acting just like Mussolini, right? People go, ah, bombast. No,
Hmm.
no, no, he's really acting just like Mussolini. Like, there's no hyperbole involved here. Yeah,
No. Well, it comes down to also taking words that have power, i.e., mean something, like Nazi, and turning it into a dumpster word where you're mad at somebody because they don't have the same belief as you. Even though they might have points, they don't believe exactly the way you believe. You call them a Nazi. Well, you're devaluing the word for one thing, you're making it less powerful, and you're
yes,
dismissing them. And there can be no communication once people are dismissed. And usually, not always, but usually, you can have a dialogue with somebody and reach a point where either one side or the other or both sides are educated and you understand where the other person is coming from. Because most people are reasonable. Not all, but most.
true enough. The hacking and coughing is because Aaron is engaging in some Canadian green there, so don't worry, he's
Oh,
not going to
nice.
die. Yeah, Siobhan says my grandfather refused to talk about his time in World War II. So did mine,
Yep.
right? But other people were willing to come in and talk to strangers, and I talked to them, and I read a lot, right? A lot of firsthand
Hmm.
accounts and things. Barbarossa is changing the subject, which is kind of cool. Any good sources on Deco Punk 1920s fantasy? I'm currently reading about the Dresden Files.
Dresden Files are good. I would actually watch Hercule Poirot because it's set in that era.
Yeah,
And if you want the visuals to stimulate you, that's about it. He is the epitome of that style. And he's very classy. I'm not sure how you wish to write your orc or how he wishes to be written, or she. But definitely that would give you the sense and steep you in the correct mystique for it. Miss Fisher's mysteries also have the style absolutely down pat for the visuals and a sense for the music and what was going on at the time and where people were at psychologically having just come out of World War One.
yeah, absolutely. I'd advise you not to just stick to fantastical sources either.
Mm-hmm.
Read stuff that's um to some degree read the literature that was written in the time. That can be
Yep.
difficult because they have a very different style of writing, but and then stuff that historical fiction that's set in the time to give you a
Yep.
feel of how it goes.
There are, you probably find some documentaries as well.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, like specifically like the 20s. I know the 30s you had sort of the swing movement coming up in Germany, and that would have been the Roaring 20s. Yeah, there should be stuff out there. Let's see. The Great Gatsby is actually pretty good for that. Um, Old newsreels. Try old newsreels. You'd be able to find them probably on YouTube.
Actually, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube like that when I
Yeah.
think about it. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to remember now. You know, my memory is shit today, but there is a classic uh, silent film that it's like a classic science fiction film. Uh, Metropolis.
Oh
Watch that.
yes. Oh, that's definitely the right style.
Yeah, yeah. Barbarossa says my great grandfather or my great great grandfather was part of a community devastated by Spanish flu. He didn't like the sound of church bells. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. I can believe that.
yeah. Esong says that this also highlights the importance of written records. Yep. I wish that I was any good at describing what's happening to me at a contemporary moment, but I'm not very good at it because I don't have the sufficient distance. So I tend to process my issues in fiction. I have never been good at keeping a diary. I never know what's important and what isn't. And I run out of steam before I finish describing whatever it is because I'm going into all the details. So, but I'm glad of people that do exist who can do that.
Mm-hmm. I never kept a diary because I was always afraid it would be used against me.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I really should get into the habit of, okay, this happened at this time. But yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Moonflower says, honestly, if you aren't taught, you don't know any better. You can't really know better if you aren't taught. Yes, if we're not taught about these things from the past, then, it's been said over and over, those who forget the past will be, or the mistakes of the past will be doomed to repeat them, right?
Beware of any group that burns books or destroys knowledge. They are your enemy.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and I don't care what it is, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what it is. Um,
To understand what's going on, you have to know the scope of what's happening, which means you have to have an understanding of what's going on the other side too.
yeah, I agree completely. Right? I do not believe in censorship. My mother gave me an adult library card signed for me to get one when I was 10
Mm-hmm.
because I was asking questions and she didn't have answers, so she figured I could go get my own answers. And
Yep.
that has never been a mistake, you
No.
know?
Knowledge is if you're old enough to ask the question and comprehend what you're asking, you were old enough for the answer.
It's always been my policy. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Not everyone has the same values, says Angst. Yeah, that's true. There can be no communication. This is in response to the lack of communication discussion, right? There can be no
Mm-hmm.
communication once people are dismissed, E Song says. I love that poignantly and powerfully stated. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
agree. If then you're not listening anymore,
No.
right?
And there's such danger to being in an echo chamber or in a bubble because you can paint the inside with whatever you like, but you have your own reality then, and you're not a part of what the world is.
Yeah, I agree completely. And this is a real problem right now because of the amount of information that's out there. We easily become siloed in our own little bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to break out of that, right? And you got to ask
Yep.
people who disagree with you why they think that way,
Yep.
because maybe there's something you haven't thought of, right? I value my conservative friends. They're very helpful to me, right? I am a raving lunatic leftist as far as some people are concerned, right? Like I'm sure I'm on a watch list, but I it's
We're
a
all on a watch list.
but it's important to me to understand my conservative friends and where they're coming from because they're not all, I may disagree with their perspectives in some cases, but they're not wrong necessarily. They
Yeah.
have reasons for thinking the way they do, and they're they often have very good points, right?
And I happen to number among your conservative friends.
That's right.
So there we go.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right. And that's important to me. It's good. Yeah,
And you
exactly.
notice we actually agree on all of the fine points.
Yeah, that is something people see. There you go. Take note, guys. Right? You sit
Yep.
down and talk with people on the other side of the spectrum, you'll often find that, contrary to the propaganda, no, all the people on the right are not, crazy fascist Nazis. And no, all the people on the left are not raving lunatic anarchists who just want to burn everything down. It's not. It's not so.
No. And as long as dialogue happens, uh, a mutual future can be reached, something that we can both work with
Right.
and support each other with. And that's really what this is about. And that's also one of the things that should come through into your book. Whatever's going on, try to make it tie to supporting the world and making the world more tangible, perhaps not necessarily progressive, but real. If you have dialogue with your protagonist and your antagonist, you can have them be on opposite sides, but actually have them perhaps communicate if possible. And if it isn't, that's fine. But do try to have these reaching points through to show that there's no absolute wall between things. It doesn't have to be that way. At least have somebody make the overture, even if it's not received. It will add more to your world.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay, just skimming through the chat, seeing if there are any things. Yeah, I mean, everybody's comment is valuable. The question is whether or not
Mm-hmm.
it goes to the immediate discussion or is very specific, or, or if it's a question, right? So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been following the chat as well.
oh, good for you, because I can't do that and talk at the same time. I
Well,
kind of have to
I have
focus. Yeah,
the benefit of having my laptop open with the chat going on in that, and my the stream is on something else. So,
right. Yeah, good advice from Angst. Look at the contemporary artworks, especially commercial art, rather than fine arts. That's a very good way to get a
oh yeah,
feel for a time period. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yes, we're having a discussion about whether or not evangelical Christians burn books on magic. Um, Depends on the tradition. Some of them do. Yeah. Not all of them. Not all of them at all. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Speaking somewhat political, says Esong, it's hard for you to feel comfortable listening to and trying to understand people whom you feel are antithetical to everything you value. It's also been hard when you try to seek for understanding but feel that your perspective in the conversation is being dismissed. It's one of the reasons why I loved what you said, Jen. Yeah.
I thank you very much.
If you reach out to people on the other side, you will occasionally find them. There are lots of people that I can't have dialogue with at all because you're right, they're just not listening, they're dismissing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dismissing being the key, like you said, right? But there are other people who are happy to explain their perspective to me. Um, Jen and I have had conversations. I've had some lively debates with her husband, George. It's been a lot of fun,
Oh
and I
yeah,
learned a lot, and it's great.
it's it's tough. Like I have been dismissed because of my belief systems and where I'm coming from, and I do my best not to take it personally. But I will talk to anybody and everybody who wishes to converse on the matter. And I've run into people who've practically tried to rip my head off
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't believe exactly the way they believed.
Aaron, you
Thank you,
smart
Aaron. I
ass.
appreciate that. And the trick is it's hard when it's close to your heart and it's
Yeah.
something you truly believe in. And perhaps, I'm I have a bit of distance from it because I'm kind of a crone. But I don't take other people's belief systems personally anymore. I can't afford it. It would drive me mad. I'm bipolar and I would have a problem with it. It would just do that. So I've created padding between myself and other people's belief systems. And as a result, I've had to get very comfortable with what I believe and what I see in the world and my understanding of the world. So much so that if I'm having a conversation with someone on that subject, I am not put off or threatened by what that other person is saying. I can actually sit and listen to what they're saying, comprehend what they're saying, get an idea of where they're coming from, what their life experience has brought to them, and why they feel the way they feel, and then find common points in which we can talk. And as a rule, I mean, Diane is an excellent example. You do find that you have things to say. There are things that you actually totally connect on. There are areas where perhaps you don't totally agree, but you have reasons for doing that. And it might just entirely be what life experience has brought you.
Yeah. Yeah, likewise. Okay, that's good. I'm glad to know. We're just double checking, making sure that, we're not offending our friend there and that, making her feel like she's dismissed. Because, no, I value Siobhan's opinion a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I don't think you've met her, but she's actually a really close friend of mine. I've known her for years. So, yeah. Esong says, I love conversations motivated by seeking understanding the other perspective. Yeah, I think that that's the
Yeah.
important thing. And as long as I believe that as both people in the conversation are trying to do that, you're going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
It's when one side stops listening that the problems start, right?
Exactly. And it comes down to fundamental respect of other people as well. It's like, I respect you. I
Right,
respect what you have to say. You have your reasons for believing what you believe and putting forth what you do, but you can articulate them.
right.
And you can articulate them without anger and without judgment and without pushing the person that you're talking to into a defensive position where they feel like they have to suddenly defend themselves against everything that you're saying to them. And
Yeah,
that is also a thing where somebody becomes triggered. They can't communicate with you anymore because they're triggered and they're emotional. And being emotional is fine, but if you're a triggered emotional, then you are reacting and you're not conversing. You're having an emotional reaction to something. It's like being allergic to something. You can't help the fact that you itch. You're just itching. So the
that's
best thing to
well
do is
put.
to step away, take an antihistamine, get a breath, go back in, knowing full well that there are things there that are probably going to set you off, and try to find common points that are safe to talk about, and then start working into the meat of what it is that you need to do. And it may take a while to do it.
I love that. I agree with you. I think that's a great metaphor. Yeah, sometimes you can't help what triggers you, for sure. I have my damage. You have your damage,
Yeah.
right? Everybody has their damage. And, sometimes you've got to be able to unplug from it. And this isn't a sign of weakness or, you know, unwillingness to talk. It's a sign of, okay, this is a problem and I need to deal with it, right? So yeah.
And, if you're speaking to somebody who is at all rational or reasonable, just say, look, I've really been like triggered in this. I need to go take a couple of breaths of air. I will return, put a pin in the conversation right here, and I will talk to you when I can talk to you.
Yeah.
Nobody has to be offended by it. Nobody has to be attacked. Just own what's yours and defend yourself by stepping away from the battle. Be a samurai. Samurai never fought when they were emotional. They fought when they were detached. It's like the old story of the decapitator, the headsman, essentially. He would go out and, on behalf of his lord, he would, of course, behead the people that he'd been ordered to behead. And in one case, he got to the end of the line, the guy spat on his face. And the samurai looked at him, turned, and walked away. And why did he do that? Well, he was angry. He was out of position. He was
I
going to
get you.
have an emotional response, and he was going to be angry when he chopped that guy's head off. And that's not what he could afford to do. It was against his honor. So if you are charged or you are triggered by something, and you're engaged with somebody who's a reasonable, rational human being, take care of yourself first. Go, okay, yeah, I need to step away for a few minutes. Don't mind me. Put a pin in this. I'll come back.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with what Esong has to say too. It's the thing that tends to be missing most in the social media conversations. Part part echo chamber, part lack of tone and delivery of context. Delivering tone and context in text is really hard. That's why we developed emojis, but they
Mm-hmm.
still don't quite convey it. It's still a code, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful for good books that challenge our perspectives and ask us to connect with others through a shared experience.
Oh yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with Daz either. Social media is erasing the skill of in person communication. It's
Well, I
true.
totally agree with that.
I know people my kids' age don't, they're terrified to talk to people on the phone or in person. They'd rather do it in text. And I fear for the damage that the necessities of COVID are doing to us in that way too, right? I
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate some distance sometimes because I'm an introvert, but yes, I also think that you're right. The in-person communication is really important. It's hard to dismiss someone that you're looking in the eye of.
Yeah. I I have to read text and certain tweets and whatnot multiple times to try to get a tone read off of them often, just because depending on what mood I'm in, I can totally take it the wrong way. And I don't like doing that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like assuming people are automatically attacking me. But that is the first place I go. And I have to really watch that. So emojis help, but talking in person is even better because then you can get past that. So I'll probably be making more use of like streaming and YouTube and other things to talk to people because this seems to be quite effective.
Yeah. I feel I me too, by the way. I always have to reread things because I immediately go to, and it's because I know it's because of my damage, right?
Hmm.
So I
Well, I
also am
agree.
terrified about being on the phone, but that's also damage.
Yeah, I hated it for years. I avoided it for years, and it's my damage to automatically assume that people don't like me.
Yeah.
So I go in with that, knowing that that might not be the case, but that is the first place I'll go if things start heading south. And I have to catch myself and go, okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a reaction to this. What can I do? Well, where's the closest bathroom? I can go have my little nervous breakdown. And, I'm good at
Mm-hmm.
having minor ones. And coming back to the conversation, having vented that stress and being slightly better. And
Yeah.
it's all about finding weird little coping mechanisms to get you past things.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Eng says existing incivility in social media is because text does not convey tone and delivery, and it's problematic to argue at the same time as one argues for the value of books that challenge our perspectives. No, right? They're two different mediums, right? When you're
Mhm.
the thing about a social media conversation is that it's reactive, right? You see what the person said, and there is an expectation that you're going to respond, and
Mhm.
within a few minutes. So there's an immediacy to the conversation. Bless you, George, that you
Bless
can't
you, George.
that you can't help but you have a bit of pressure to react to it. With a book that challenges perspectives, you can put it down, you can think about it, you can come back to
Hmm.
it, right? Much more difficult to do that in a social media conversation. Yeah.
You're getting more bless you, Georges.
Yeah. Yeah, and yes, and best to come back to the theme of understanding and acknowledging. Yeah, I agree. Okay, we're at 3 o'clock now. I've passed 3 o'clock, so I think I'm going to take a brief break to refill my coffee. And if you need to take a break too, then we'll. I don't know if you do, but
I
and
might be able to convince George to get me something to drink.
there you go. That works. Right, and we'll be back within 10 minutes, more like five probably. I think I might go a little over time if you have the time to do so. I don't know if you do. Do you?
I have, oddly enough, a turkey in the oven.
Oh,
Um,
so you don't. Okay, fair enough.
I may actually, but I'll have to go and check on it. So
Yeah.
I might have to nip out and just make sure that things are okay.
Yeah, fair enough. The reason why is because of course we ended up getting started late with all the technical issues, right?
Yeah.
So if
Well, I'm not worried.
okay,
I'm
but if you
chatty.
have to go, that's cool.
This is my safety zone. I'm like in my space. I'm fine. I can talk.
That's awesome. Right on. Okay, don't go away, guys. We'll be back in a couple of
I'm ready and good to go.
And we are back with J.I. Rogers, author of the Corpse File series, which is amazing. I see that there has been some emotion in the chat. I have not been, apparently, I've been kind of glib in my response, and I feel that I should address that. Okay. And I apologize. Okay, I perhaps have not been, I don't believe that emotional exchanges on Twitter and that kind of thing, Facebook and whatnot, are the best idea for good communication. I think that they are places where we're encouraged to react emotionally, but we don't have an emotional connection to the person that we're talking to. Now, forums can be better, and personal text conversations can be better. I made the point the other day, so obviously I don't believe all text chat is bad, right? That relationships that start online actually have a greater chance of success, it turns out, than relationships that start, say, you meet at a restaurant or whatever. And the reason why is because all you've got is the conversation. So if you're being honest about who you are, then it becomes easier to communicate in that form. And for many people, it is easier. It's that emotional exchange with strangers on things like Facebook and Twitter that's a problem, right?
Mhm.
I had this experience in my own life. I worked as a taxi dispatcher, right? And I worked on the night shift. And that crowd can be interesting, right? Because a lot of people are drunk, and, on other intoxicants, and they're going out and partying, right? So when they talk to me on the phone and I'm this disembodied voice on the phone, they were miserable. That was a horrible job. I got called a bitch at least once a day, right? It was terrible, right? And because it was a middle management position, there really wasn't much I could do to help people. They were mad at me because their cab was late or their cabbie missed them or whatever. I have no authority to do anything. I've just got the best, I got to send the cab to the place. I do the best I can with the information that I have, and that's all I got. Right? I have no recourse if it doesn't work out that way. So it was more frustrating in that, people were angry at me because I'm the voice they talk to, and that's all they can talk to express their frustration, but I can't help them, right? So, but then what I started doing is I started going around with Aaron in his taxi after I got off work for a couple hours because we worked at slightly different hours. I started the afternoon shift, he started the graveyard shift, and we didn't see a lot of each other for a while. When people met me face to face and I said, "Yeah, I'm the one you called a bitch an hour ago," I found that they stopped doing that on the phone after a while because they met me and I became real, right? If you think of the other person as real and you respect them because they're real, then it becomes easier to communicate. If you don't think of them as real, which it's really easy, to forget on YouTube comments and, exchanges on Twitter, right? Then it exacerbates the situation. And because you don't have body language or tone to get what the person means, it's easier to immediately jump to the conclusion, as Jen does, as I do, that you're being attacked. Some people, have learned to take a moment and try to get their heads on straight, as she has, as I have, but other people haven't. And it makes it very difficult to communicate. And because we're doing it all online, we're losing that ability to do it face to face, right? I hope that is I don't know, clearer, I guess. I apologize if I offended anybody and made them feel like they're invalidated. I don't mean to do that, right? I'm just saying I see the problems in these mediums and we need ways to address them.
No, I would agree. And again, I did not mean to antagonize anyone over this particular subject. It's just also I consider it to be a generational thing. People who are in below the age of 30 have grown up with this tech. They were introduced to it right off the bat. They have a far easier time reading it, interacting with it, and knowing what everything means. I look at it, I get a text message, and it takes me a while to figure out tone. I find spelling mistakes or lack of spelling irritating and lack of punctuation irritating, but I'm old. So it's like, okay, I have to get over myself and understand this is part of the communication thing. But use of emojis helps me out.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You know what? There's actually a way of punctuation with text messaging that is not the same as regular punctuation. This really helped me out. I didn't know that. Do you know, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, that if you use a period at the very end of everything that you've said, then you're kind of, being like, and so there kind of attitude. I didn't know that. Nobody
I
told
learned
me.
that a month ago.
Yeah, I
And,
know. 6 months ago, I think I learned this. Come on, okay. If we're over 30, do us a favor and explain that to us rather than getting pissed off and assuming we know, right? Because we probably don't. When I didn't have a computer in my house until I was out living on my own, right, as an adult. So cut me a break here, guys, right? And yeah, we have to work to adapt to that. You're right. Those of us
mhm.
who are in this generation. But I also feel like that generation needs to adapt to us, right? To some degree, and give us a chance and not go, oh, fucking boomers or whatever. No, I'm not a boomer, first of all. I'm Gen X and closer to millennials in the way I think and feel about a lot of things than I am to most of the people of my generation. But I'm 45 and I didn't have a computer until I was an adult. I don't understand all the subtext. I don't understand the subtext in face to face conversation a lot because I'm either autistic or I have CPTSD. So cut me a break, guys. That's what I'm saying, right?
Well, it's about creating an interface. And like with writing, you're creating an interface between yourself and the story you're telling and the readers. You want to create a world bridge between the two of them. With technology, it's the same thing. If you want to create conversations or you want to have communication be clear, you have to be willing to backwards articulate for some people who aren't as fluid as you are. So it's like trying to take somebody who grew up with floppy disks and introduce them to the concept of DVD. It's like, well, no, you don't need a 5 1/4 floppy anymore. You can use this, or you can use a thumb drive, or it's just there online in the cloud. Sometimes you have to figure out, okay, how can I get the technologies to work together? People are like technologies. I go
Yeah.
upstairs and I help my dad with his computer issues. My dad is 85. And it's like he understands it a lot better than a lot of people in his generation, but he still gets really frustrated with very basic things, or at least things that I find really basic. And I have to backwards engineer how I'm going to explain to him how to use it so he can actually use the system in a way that he can articulate what he needs done to it with me. It's it's an art form, and anybody getting angry over it sort of impedes progress in many ways. And I think what we'll see is we'll see a backwards adaptation, then a forwards adaptation, bringing people online, and some people will just fall off like they do. And you'll have no communication with those people, at least not on in text or in any of the modern sort of media components. And then those people will be gone, and there will just be a generation of people who understand how to do everything online.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom is 73, right? And I have given up trying to explain computers to her. She just doesn't understand. It doesn't seem like she can retain the knowledge, and it just makes me and her frustrated, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, kudos to your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I apologize if I was if the implication seemed to be, and there we go again with the problems in text, right? The reaction was emotional because the assumption was that I was unaware of um, people's I think ableism was thrown in there, right? And that's not, no, you know what, I'm an introvert and I have difficulty with direct social interaction, so no, I'm keenly aware of those difficulties, right? But I also, and I guess was not clear enough, right? So that, I'm sorry I was not clear enough, and I hope that this has, I don't know, I hope I'm more clear, and I hope people still aren't angry about it. If you are, I'm sorry, but that's my experience. So
Help us create a bridge.
yeah,
That way we can basically get the communication flowing again. So teach us how to be better texters.
yeah,
Share your knowledge with us.
yeah, absolutely. I want to learn how to be better. I don't like being, taken badly online when I didn't mean any harm, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of the reasons why on Twitter I will happily pass along people's info. I will happily boost people. I will share good news, but I very rarely tweet. And part of the reason is it's context. I like to be taken in context, and I like people to be able to read my tone, and I do not convey either of those particularly well in text unless I'm writing a book, and you can't do that on Twitter. Well, you can, but not to any great degree.
I don't have that kind of time to do this, the thread, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Esong says, I find that with text-only conversation, it's easier to forget the human behind the words. That's the point I think that I was
Hmm.
trying to make.
Yeah.
If both people are acknowledging the human within the conversation, I find that text conversations can be enriching. Yes, yes, when you're approaching it from a perspective of, hey, we're a couple people who are trying to get to know each other or whatever, or we're friends and we're chatting and we happen to be chatting in text. We've already established that we're friends. Yeah, that's cool. That's easy, right? And it can be better. You're right. Um,
Hmm.
Most of the conversations on Twitch are on text in chat. Yep. But because, especially as an ASC member and the light streamer core, yeah, we can see the human behind the people who are chatting. Yeah, we've all seen each other. We've interacted, right? I know what you look like because, I've got a face to a name. I know what your voice sounds like, right? Yeah, we can see the human behind the people who are chatting. We acknowledge their hopes and dreams, their ambitions, their worlds, their creations, and so forth. Yeah, yeah, that's legit.
Yep.
Yeah,
Can't say it better than that.
right. Okay, now actually, they're bringing it back to world building, right? Because we're trying to. I don't care. I don't care if we go way off topic. It's fine with me. But uh, this is actually a valid point, I would say, right? New technologies will have their consequences. One of these consequences is that, as we've seen here directly illustrated, there is a gap either of generation or ability. I don't know for sure which it is. I'm tended to believe it's more a generational one, right? Where
Hmm.
a form of communication that we were taught and feel comfortable in, right, is not being used hardly at all by the other group. So they're mad at us that we don't want to use their form of communication, and we're frustrated with them because we don't understand their form of communication, right? There's going to be things like that.
Yes. Consequences.
Like, suppose, okay, all of a sudden magic becomes available, right? Let's say that magic appears right now. This is Shadowrun, okay? And magic suddenly becomes available even though it wasn't available before. So what kind of effect is that going to have on communication? Is it going to be considered polite to send somebody a mage sign before you go visiting them? Well, what about the people who don't have magic? Are they going to be able to send the mage sign, right? What about people who don't own computers right now? How are they going to communicate with things, right? Our government services have all gone entirely online, right? Um, Jamie, my partner, has run into difficulties with this. He doesn't own a cell phone. He doesn't want one, right? And they're doing everything on the cell phone, and they feel that they can, because they're trying not to put people in offices because of COVID. So there's nobody available to phone to answer the question that you've got to ask, right? If my mother were in this group where we'd have to access government benefits this way, she would not be able to get them. right? Because
Hmm.
she's not capable of doing that, right? So, where do we come together, and is that, going to be a thing where people come together, right? Like, how do you bridge that gap? And do you? Maybe that's the issue. Maybe that's part of the conflict you're generating in your world.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one. It could be based on just a generational disparity, or it could be financial. It could be aptitude. If you have a magical aptitude in the case of any place with magic, there are so many different ways to break that down and have it be relevant in the story with consequences. I'm just thinking, like an example in my world, for instance, due to the ambient radiation, you couldn't send any sort of transmissions through the atmosphere. So you had to rely on actual cables that were laid in the ground and send signals through them, much like old, like dial-up phones, the type that you would have a landline. And they used that for a couple thousand years because they could not use anything else. Well, in the recent years, the last 20 years of my world, they've suddenly been able to use wireless. There are people who don't know how to use it. I've not addressed them yet, but there are those who still rely heavily on the old technology, and everything is gravitating towards new technology. So it's an interesting thing to consider. How do you bridge that gap? How do you deal with the people who can't come along or won't come along, or, for whatever reason can't, are unable?
Right.
And I'm looking at the questions down here, and thank you, Angst. Within a year of your age, you keep insisting it's generational, but my experience with face to face compared to text conversation differs from yours. Well, yes, it does. And it's, again, it might depend on where you live. It might depend on how available the technology is. It might depend on how you socialize. There are so many different factors that come into it. And that's one of the great things about having a widely populated world, is the fact that you have all of these different ways, these different facets of looking at technology, or at these different elements that can make your world a richer place. So do you have an easier time with text, or do you prefer face-to-face conversations?
This is one of those things where, um, okay, I can't help but react emotionally to this, right? And this is again one of those things where, you know, I have to pull back, right?
Hmm.
My experience has been okay. So, I told you about my taxi dispatching experience, right? I have an experience where when I first started getting on message boards and Yahoo groups and forums, I joined a lot of pagan groups, right? Because I'm a neo-pagan, right? I'm
Hmm.
a Wiccan. So I was trying to connect with other people there, and if there, I ended up getting into a lot of conflicts that I didn't need to get into because people took something I said in a way that I did not intend.
Hmm.
Nor would they accept my apology when I tried to express that it was not the way I had intended it, right? So I feel like this is something that, again, I'm feeling that reaction to that, right? I feel like I've apologized. I said maybe it was generational, maybe it's something else, maybe it's experiential. I don't believe I said definitively one thing or another, although I will say, again, from my experience, it tends to be linked to generation more often than not. Your experience is obviously different than mine. Maybe you grew up in a place with better tech than I did. cool. I'm glad you did, right? But again, this is my experience. I also feel like I don't want to talk about this anymore, if that's okay. I would rather work more on talking about world building and why we came here than my opinion of texting. Okay?
It might have also been something that I said, so I apologize if I've stirred the pot a bit more. Um, this may be on me. So, sorry, guys.
Hey, Aegon, how you doing? I hear Kitty meowing in the background there.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We talked about our pet peeves is world building. We talked about what is necessary for world building. What do you like to see in world building that isn't necessary but you enjoy?
What do I like to see other authors do, or what do I like to do myself? Other authors?
Both.
Um, I like authors to show me how they actually enjoy or actually love their world, where they've invested themselves in it in a way that has made them happy, where they've given their characters some extra care or attention. It's hard, it's a bit of polish, and it can take a variety of forms. Some depth in the character, perhaps, something in their history that is unique or interesting that would have taken some thought. Uh, it's sort of like walking into a scene that they're describing, and they convey to me pretty much the setting in such a way that I can place myself there and feel the dimension that the author has given it, that the love that's actually gone into crafting it. It's not just sort of generic set B hauled out from, cabinet A. It's something that actually meant something. They put some thought into it. That to me shows that the author loves what they do. And while it may not have been something that I would have necessarily spent time on, I can appreciate the effort and the energy that went into it. And it stimulates the story. It helps, uh, I don't know, give it that extra bit of sparkle that makes it engaging.
Awesome. I agree with that. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that one though because yeah, no, I feel that. I think you've said it very well. So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions related to this at this point? Have we just been babbling and not did we go way off into tangents that, discourage people from asking questions cuz that's what we're here for is to answer questions on this, right?
I'm
And
terribly frightening. I'm a conservative.
I'm an evil anarchist leftist. That's great. Well, okay, cool. Thanks. Song says I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I think it's one of the best guest author streams I've seen. Well, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hopefully, this is the beginning of something that can happen more often.
I would absolutely agree. I would definitely love to do this more for sure. Yeah, if you said something about getting into streaming, I'd be happy to be on your show. That'll be fun.
Perfect. Well, I am actually on Twitch, so I just haven't done anything yet. It's like
Ah.
World Anvil. I am on World Anvil. I have stuff up. I'm just not showing it to anybody yet.
Yeah, yeah, actually this is one of those things too, right? We in
Yeah.
differing personalities. She's got to have it all perfect before she wants to expose it to the world. I get overwhelmed with the excitement and I'm like, "Look at this!" before it's even half done,
Oh, you have no idea how badly I want to show stuff off and talk to people
I
about
want to
things and whatnot. Do
see.
you? Okay,
Yeah.
I will send you an invite
Awesome.
and you can
Okay.
come and see.
Awesome. That would be so cool. I can't wait to see cuz yeah,
Yeah.
I love
And
new stuff.
it's not finished by any stretch, but it's getting there.
It's okay. Doesn't have to be. I recognize I'm looking at first draft. It's okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Daz says, question, when do you know you have dumped too much world into your story? That is an excellent question.
Ooh, when it has become all tell and no show, and my readers have gone to sleep, and my beta readers come back to me and go, "Why did I need to know that? Where is it relevant?" And my characters go, you've totally cut the scene of any of our action, and you've gone overboard in describing this one element that will have absolutely no bearing on anything else. So why did you do this? No, it's there is a sense that's what first drafts are for, to be fair. That's where you dump everything. You throw everything out there against, it's like spaghetti. You throw it against the wall, see what sticks, what doesn't. And then second draft is what stuck. And you need to just use your first draft for straining out what works and what doesn't. So
That's a good
that's my
idea
answer.
there, Esong. Yeah, I love the idea of asking why this detail is important as you go through and read about your world and your story. Sorry, here my face is right in the camera, but I have the sunlight like right in my face right now. So, okay, there we go. Um, it depends too on genre and expectations of genre. Um, David Weber is notorious for his info dumps. He will go on for chapters about the details of the technology behind how his various warships work. And me, I skim it to try to get the important details, and that's it, right? I don't actually read it, right? Jamie, my partner, he doesn't even do that. He just flips through it. He doesn't care. But some people love it.
Master and Commander. Master and Commander would list every single detail of all of the things on board the ship, the futtock shrouds and all of these things. And I got to the point where my brain would see the thing and it would go, boat stuff, boat stuff, boat stuff, boat stuff. And it wouldn't even take in the information anymore because it was an info dump to me. I was never going to use the info. It wasn't really relevant to what the story was telling me, but it was good color. But it became too much. And it's like, okay, I know you know your boat stuff. That's really nice. Boat stuff, boat stuff, boat stuff. Okay, thank you very much. I don't need any more of this. And I would glaze past that. So I actually had to reread a couple of chapters to pick up what was relevant to go on in the story because I started glazing too much. And that's when you know.
Yeah,
The worlds will always be the most engaging to the author. When you're writing your stuff, you love your stuff. This is your baby. You're going to totally get into all the nitty gritty, all the details, and want it to be perfect. You know where everything is, you know where all the hairs on the head of your characters are. And that's fascinating for you. It might not be for your readers.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And on the other hand, this is a very interesting point because you're right. Okay. But for me, I read that stuff. And the reason why I read it is because I happened to be interested in that particular type of info dump. Because part of the reason why I was reading the series was to get a feel for the nautical technology so I could accurately describe it. I don't
And
go
there you
into as
go.
much detail in my story because I don't understand as much about it as he does, perhaps, or maybe I just don't think it's as necessary, but I read it with keen interest. Yeah,
Yes. And that's a difference in readers. It's about what audience you're going for. I did not it did not diminish my love of the series. I thought it was a brilliant series. But for
agreed.
me, I had to basically I got to the point where I didn't need it renamed for me because it wasn't relevant to why I was reading the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I agree, right? I love The Honorverse. It's one of my favorite series of all time.
Mhm.
I still skim through the details on the tech. I'm like, okay, I want to get a basic grasp of what it is and why it does what it does, more or less. I don't care about the manufacturing details. I don't care about numbers usually, right?
Mhm.
Test pattern, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Oh no, go ahead.
Same thing. My Pinterest has a big folder in it that's all of the tech articles that I've saved to it and whatnot. And I've devoured those. And, if you're interested in quantum computing and stuff like that, it's interesting. And I've gone through and I've read them very, very carefully. And a lot of it, of course, it's very dry and it's written to be tech. And I will absorb it because it's relevant to my book. I need to know enough about that to make my technology work. So I was reading it for those fine points. I've done that with other books of science fiction. I've read it for fine points because I needed to know the language. I needed to know how things actually work together. I didn't need necessarily the numbers or the other basis in their space or time, but I did need certain information. And I read it for that reason.
Yeah.
So, you're pandering to a spectrum on an audience level. So have enough there to keep everybody engaged. And I was laughing there because I was reading the comments and somebody is skimmed because it's just sex stuff, sex stuff, sex stuff. And can we have more plot soon? I feel exactly the same way. There are certain books I'll look at the cover and I do judge them by the cover sometimes or the blurb on the back, and I'll play flip with it. And if I open up and it's a big steamy sex passage, I'll go, I probably won't read this, but thank you very much.
Yeah, I
And it's
hear you
not
there
because
too,
I have
Legs.
anything against it. It's just like, okay, they tend not to have a lot of plot. And I love plot. I really do. You hook me with a good
Yeah.
story, a good plot, good characters. It can have sex, it can have bad language. Certainly my books do. It can have all of the other good stuff. It's just don't make that the plot.
Yeah. Fair enough. And everybody's got their own interests in the things that they like. Uh,
Exactly.
Romance and erotica are very successful genres. Lots of people love it. I've even tried my hand at writing a story or two in the genre, right?
I think we all have.
Yeah. I agree with Esong. The first honor book, I loved the detail because it helped make everything real. After that, it became so present that it was more of a roadblock and distraction for me. I understand that. I also understand why other people like it. To be fair, the first book in the series was the most cleanly written. That was probably the one where the editors cut out the most tech related explanation stuff. And after that, because he was so successful and they saw that people liked it, they did less and less of that. There's actually entire cons now based entirely on the Honorverse. I thought about attending one and I
Mhm.
figure I'm never going to. And the reason why is because I will never know enough about the tech and the details that to understand everything these people are going on about. I love the series, right? But
Mhm.
I would screw something up and I would get mocked, you know, because it just doesn't compute that much for me, right? So,
I think it would still be interesting though.
oh yeah, it would be interesting
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, it was supposed to be a murder mystery and a bunch of sex stuff. Oh yeah, I know, right?
Hmm.
I know what you mean by that.
They murdered the plot. There we go.
Um, Sarah Berman and I were opining about that the other day. One source of constant frustration for her is that she writes in urban fantasy. And that's really the best description of what she does. But her urban fantasy is more Dresden Files, right? And because she's
Hmm.
female, and because there's been a crossover with paranormal romance in a lot of places, people are expecting, True Blood, right?
Hmm.
And that's not her deal, right?
No.
They're expecting uh what's her pickle there? The vampire hunter succubus. I should totally know her name because she's a very important speculative fiction Canadian author. Tanya Huff. They're
Oh yeah.
expecting Tanya Huff, right? And that's not what she does, right? And it's a constant source of frustration because the people who seem to be interested in what she's writing will start reading it because that's what they're expecting, and that's not what they're going to get, right? But the
Hmm.
people who would be interested in things like the Dresden Files aren't reading her stuff because oh, she's a girl, she's going to be writing all this sex crap, right? And that brings up a whole nother question. We'll have a panel on that maybe in January or February after Nano and everything is all done about how to reach your target audience. But
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, I feel you there. Yeah. Um, okay. I am reading your commentary, Aegon, and I'm interested in what's going on, but I don't want to get too far off track with the conversation, so I'm not going to read it out. But I am interested in hearing your details. So, yeah, yes. If it's supposed to be a mystery plot, if it's supposed to be a mystery book, give us a mystery plot, not the mystery of whose boots are under the bed. Well said, Daz. Yeah, yeah. Daz says, that makes me wonder if I should go by my initials. That's a question that women often face when they are getting into genre fiction. Obviously, Jennifer, Jen has decided to do that. I have decided not to. For me, it was a political choice to not do that. And I have paid a price for it. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Angst, you're absolutely right. I mean Laurel K. Hamilton. I don't mean Tanya Huff. Tanya Huff has a lot less porn in her plot. Correct. You're quite right. I was.
Mhm.
I did have the wrong name. Thank you very much. Yes. And again, nothing wrong with that. I've read both series. I like them both. Right? But I knew what I was getting when I read it. Right? So yeah, I can totally understand the frustration of it not being what it purports to be, right? And yeah, Aegon, I agree with you, right? Aegon says, I don't care who writes the story if it's good. This is a bit of a side tangent, but it's a soapbox, right? Hell, Robin Hobb is one of my favorite writers. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, but Robin is also a name that can be taken as male or female, and often people do assume, right?
Yep. I did it for several reasons. One, fits better on the cover. I can make it bigger.
There you go.
Two, people are always misspelling my name.
Uh-huh.
And three, it's an extremely common name. And there are other Jennifer Rogers out there who write.
Yep, legit,
So
all
it's
of
like,
that.
and I'm an artist, and all of my artwork is published under J.I. Rogers. So I figured just have it all under one umbrella.
And to be fair, part of the reason why I didn't choose to do that is because D.P. Morrison doesn't sound very good, right? Diane Morrison sounds much better,
Yes.
right? So, yeah.
Heck, I'd buy her books. Oh, wait, I did.
Yes, likewise. It's kind of fun. We patron each other. It's cool. Okay,
Yeah.
Angst says the Ashes and Smoke series have vampire romance, but I've never had to skip pages with Ms. Huff. Yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
Yep. And having a common name as a writer can be a problem. Just I'll summarize my little soapbox that I was going to get onto there. Readers don't care about the gender of the author. Study after study has proven that. They don't care. Everybody's like you, Aegon. Nobody gives a shit. They want to read a good story. They don't give a damn who wrote it. Hell, I don't even know details about most of the authors, and the only reason why I know details about some of them is because I talk to them on Twitter occasionally because it's part of the writing community. Otherwise, I wouldn't care, right? But publishers think they care. And because publishers think they care, it affects how people are perceived in the industry. It is more difficult for women to break into genre fiction when they are presenting themselves as female. Not all genre. It's easier for them to break into romance. Men have a more difficult time breaking into romance, right? So sexism applies both ways. But
Mm-hmm.
things like, action adventure, science fiction, westerns, these things are women have more difficulty breaking into it because publishers perceive them as not selling as well. Not that publishers are sexist per se, that's not the reason. It's that publishers ultimately are trying to sell a product, right? So they buy something that they think is going to sell and they try to produce it into a marketable product. So if they think women aren't going to sell as well, they're less likely to buy their books. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem. Yeah. Um, yeah, having a common name as a writer can be a problem. Aegon, I agree. There is a woman out there named Diane Morrison who spells it with two N's, who writes Christian religious books, I have discovered.
It's
Yeah.
your doppelganger.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, she's gonna come get me in my dreams. I don't know. Yeah. No, it's cool. Whatever. But yeah, there's been confusion, right?
Mhm.
Um, Makara says, kind of lucky to have a common name. My wife and I both have to use aliases online because our names are literally unique. Fair enough.
Mhm.
Or, uh, okay, yeah, that was a bit confusing, but I get it now. God says publishers of any kind have always been idiots. Um, I don't agree with that. I don't. I've known too many publishers. They really are generally, unless they're the big five and they're a big corporation, they're doing the best they can. Most smaller publishers really do love literature and they really do want to help authors get out there. Part of the problem is that they just know things, and publishing is probably the most opaque industry I've ever seen. It's very difficult to even determine how your books are selling and where, right? And
Mhm.
the other problem is that they are overwhelmed by submissions. So they often make mistakes based on snap judgments, right? Like the most disheartening thing I ever saw in my life was watching Bain Books has a YouTube channel and they did a live stream of one of their slush pile sessions. And if they don't love you by the first paragraph, it's out the door. They have a turnaround time of a year, right? And you have to submit the book and you have to wait for an entire year and not submit it anywhere else because they don't accept simultaneous submissions and they'll reject you in a paragraph,
Mhm.
right? That is so fucking depressing, and it's one of the many reasons why people choose indie or small press publishing. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're at 6 minutes after 4 now, according to my clock. Do you have time to go over, or, do you just want to plug your stuff and say goodnight? I know you're cooking turkey, so,
Yeah, hold on for a quick second.
okay.
George? He may have gone upstairs to take the tinfoil off,
Right.
but I should probably go check. Um,
Okay, we can go to a quick break if you like, and just give me a thumbs up when you get back, or go, shake your head in the screen when you get back, and then I'll come on long enough to plug your stuff where people can find you, and then we'll go. Either way.
that sounds awesome. I will be back quickly.
Okay.
All right.
Don't
I'll
go
leave
away,
the.
everybody. We'll be right back.
All right. And I'm back. Me too.
All right, there we go. Sorry, I forgot to unmute my stream mic. So yeah, I'm glad people seem to have been enjoying the stream, and I'm sorry for reacting emotionally earlier to part of the conversation. And it does have, it's what we were talking about, right? It has to do with my own damage, right? So, but it's cool. And I'm glad that we've had this opportunity to look at this point, right? The fact that people do react emotionally to things and may not entirely be within their control all the time. So.
No. And it's also important to note that this is kind of an accepting place to do it, whereby you stated what was going on, you were clear with where you were at, and it was just you had a safe space to do it.
And that, you know what, this community is very supportive, and I find that it's a good place to do that. I have no hard feelings, by the way. I hope nobody else does either. I'm glad that people felt comfortable to express when they were upset. That's a good thing. And once again, I do apologize if I've hurt anyone. That wasn't my intention, or if I have neglected, looking at something from another person's perspective. So Dinosaur Bob says, it could have been a discussion about dung beetle turd ball mechanics. Would have been more interesting and useful than the discussion I was in. Were you at work? I'm sorry to hear that. That's shitful.
You have my utmost sympathy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think Bob has a corporate job, and I think he would understand Nash's frustrations with some things very well.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're at like 10 after 4. I figured we'd go till about 4:30 because we were about half an hour behind. So thank you
Yep.
very much for, coming to be here. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we've got some new people who have come into the chat. We've been discussing world building. How much is too much? How do you express it to your readers in the process of your story if you're a writer? Right? These things are, what we've been talking about. And I think it's been a really in depth discussion that I've been really enjoying. So,
Oh,
yeah.
me too. And I've enjoyed the questions as well.
Yeah, they're excellent questions, guys. You guys have been amazing in the chat. Just such good commentary and questions. Um, while people are thinking of questions, what are some of your favorite examples of good books with good world building?
Oh, good grief. Um, that's kind of tough because there are a lot of them, and they're probably all different
That's
reason or
great.
different ways that they've gone at it. Um, and I'm probably going to lose all of them now because I'm having to think about them.
I
Uh,
hear that. I know it. We're doing this totally off the cuff. There was no script. I didn't tell her exactly what I was asking. Just and because I didn't even know, right? I was like, "Here's the basic topic." So
all right, that's like probably something that would deserve its own show. So I make you a deal. We're in the process of setting up our library right now. I will pull all of the books that have been a major inspiration to me at some point, and I will bring them with me, sit down, and we can talk about it. And if you can stream or you can see me on camera, I will show the book and explain why I loved it.
that's
That would
awesome.
probably be the best way to go about this because just off the top of my head, nothing is coming to me. I'm having one of those
That's
blank
cool.
moments.
That's fair. Totally. You know what? Let's do that. Let's get together in December while World
Sure.
Ember is going on at World Anvil.
Ooh, I'm
And
going to participate in that, by the way.
awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yay. That's great. Okay, so then you have to make some of your stuff public because you can't submit it unless it's public. Ooh,
I know.
awesome. Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't wait. Okay, I'm very
I've
excited.
already promised my patrons October. I will make my World
Yes, I
Anvil
saw that.
open for them.
I
Yep.
did. Yep. Cool. This is great. Okay, I'm excited.
Ooh, I see a question.
Yes.
Okay.
How do
How do
you
you know?
go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. How do you know the world building in your story is too bland or too rad for the intent of your story? Um, First draft. I'll write down precisely what is going on in my head, all the action, all of the other stuff. I'll put the characters in there. And often, I don't know how you guys work, but my characters talk to me, and they always have. And they will tell me that something needs to be tweaked or something is too outrageous. And then the people that are my beta readers will look at it and go, yeah, this, this was really boring. Or, how do you expect anybody to survive that? So there are
Do you
lots
get
of
that
checks and
question a lot
balances.
too? I do. We might be a bit cruel to our characters here, just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've written characters' death scenes too, when I've been really mad at them because they're not doing exactly what I want them to do. And I'm sure everybody here who writes has had their characters surprise them or come up with dialogue that was not what you had planned or have moved the plot line in a direction
Mm-hmm.
that you'd not intended. So it's very much kind of a cooperative effort because I know there's more going on in the subconscious.
Yeah. I catch Angst's question there, right? It was
Hmm.
okay because she started with a statement. I've been thinking about fictional politics a fair bit lately, and I know they're fairly important in Honor Harrington's world. Yeah, huge, right? How much thought do you give to political systems and situations in your worlds? For me, it totally depends on genre. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, it is. It is a brilliant question. It is important. I
Mhm.
agree completely, Angst. It's awesome.
In my
Yeah.
series, politics are incredibly important, and there are factions. It's a corporate setting. There are like there's a refugee population that have their own politics in play. It's the meshing of the two rule systems because it is a tiered sort of legal system that is operating to keep one in power and one out of power. Um, I give a lot of thought to it. I examine how the world works. I look for governments that are doing similar things. It's if you want something to be real and breathing and relatable, you have to base a bit of it in what we've got going on planet Earth.
Because we don't have any other examples of how politics works, so we can only draw from what
Exactly.
exists. Yeah.
And it's easier to pull from something that you can see the flaws in and can see how it works rather than create something that honestly looks brilliant on paper, but it would break down over time. It's like, all right, straight up communism is beautiful on paper. It is.
Yep.
The whole concept of it is brilliant. However, that's not how humans work. You
No.
can get a small group of people to work that way and they will work and help each other and everything will work. But as you get more and more people into the system, you end up with a corruption of it. It's like any religious group or meditational society or anything. The more people you add to the mix, the more it starts to wobble and go off balance. It's like building a pot on a potter's wheel. If you can build it straight up. But if you start to get too tricky with it, especially if it's something you aren't all that used to, it'll end up wobbling and falling off, or you'll end up skewing it or blowing out the side or anything. It's easier to base it off of something that you can see working and you have mm, just humanoid or human like connections to.
And this is an interesting point on which the conservative and the progressive here actually agree, right? I think when you
Mm-hmm,
add too many people to the mix, this is why we have rules, laws, and bureaucracy, right? The more people you have involved in the things, the more that kind of stuff is necessary. And yes, I would love for the world to be communist. I would,
mm-hmm,
but it won't work because humans don't work that way, right? The key for me is adapting the systems that do work from a socialist perspective to make life better for people as much as possible. But do I think
mm-hmm.
we're ever going to have a perfect socialist society? Well, it hasn't happened yet, has it?
Nope.
So no, of course not, right?
And it's because humans are humans. And while we have the best and the brightest among us, we've also got the lowest common denominator. And any mob becomes the lowest common denominator.
Yep.
So
I think they've now done a study and they estimate that something like 10% of the population are sociopaths,
Yep,
right?
I would
So,
believe that.
you know, all the laws that exist for that 10%, right? Because that, you know, if somebody doesn't have the normal reactions to, you know, I don't know, our human cooperative instincts. I think this
Mhm.
is totally my opinion. If anybody else disagrees with me, you're quite welcome to. But I think that, you know, if we didn't have that factor, then we would not need all the rules and laws, and it would be much easier. The rule could just simply be don't be an asshole, and we'd be fine with
Yeah.
that. But you
The
know,
world would be a beautiful place if people could live with the "don't be an asshole, treat people the way you wanna be treated." Very
right.
simple.
Good night, Macaro. Yes, hello, Coffee. You're catching the very end of our interview stream. This is J.I. Rogers, author of the Corpse Files series, and we are having a chat about world building and what is necessary and important to do in your book. Dinosaur Bob says, I love hearing writers talk about their characters not doing what was intended. I write RPG adventures. I know going in that my characters will misbehave.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another sign that you're doing it right, I think, is when your characters take on a life of their own and they start to do their own thing. They will take adventurous steps off to the left to do something that perhaps is even better than what you had imagined for them, or at least certainly leads to a better story.
Absolutely. Now, before it goes off screen here on my chat, Esong says, "Question: In my world, the systems, there are multiple factions at play, many of which overlap. How do you manage presenting multiple fronts within a story?" That is a very good question.
In my case, I changed chapters, but
I at least
I
change
do,
scenes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
change scenes, change
Star, star,
chapters,
star. At least,
yeah,
yeah.
and have you could even do a location shift, which I've done, and have it go to the place where the one faction is or is strong. You can have scenes where two people who are represent the different factions interrelate, and they're coming at it from the perspectives of those two factions, which will color their responses to one another and indeed what actually transpires between them. I don't know if that's helpful.
I think for me, when dealing with political factions, I think about what do they stand for and what do they want, right? And these are the
Hmm.
big things that I try to keep in mind. Everything else orbits around that, right? So if you have a political faction, it exists for a reason and it's trying to accomplish a particular goal, right? But it also might, the thing to remember too is that not everybody in that faction is going to have the same ideas about how that goal should be achieved. I
No.
have seen more groups fall apart due to minor disagreements about the process than I have anything else, right? So, and that's my personal experience, right? So, I think that if I'm reading about a political faction, I kind of want to hear some tension between them if the political faction is important to the overall result of the plot, right? I tend to get much more political in things like epic fantasy and space opera than I do in my Weird West series, for example, because Weird West is it's right now it's smaller focused, right? Now I know what the politics are going on in, right? And I'm gonna go there eventually, but that's not where I've started, right? And so it depends on
Hmm.
what you're working on and what the focus of your story is, right? But yeah, those are my suggestions. Anyway, her politics are excellent, so please take her advice. I find her like I really I get where the different factions are coming from. I even understand and sympathize to some degree with her antagonistic factions. I totally see what they're after, right? I get it. I don't
Hmm.
agree with them, but I get it.
Hmm.
Yeah. I agree with you, Bob. There, all economic systems work if everybody plays. The problems arise because you can never get everyone to play. Yeah,
Yeah.
humans by nature. have a variety of different responses, and this is probably something that's been of an advantage to us in evolution and survival, but it does tend to confront our cooperation instincts. Yeah.
No, it's true. Self-interest is a very interesting and consistent motivator for everything, even in our own sort of political struggles going on right now in our various countries. You know, most people will vote by self-interest. They won't necessarily vote for what's best for everyone. They'll go, oh, who's giving me the most stuff? And that's how they'll vote.
Yeah, or who's trying to accomplish the goals in the way that I think they should be accomplished. And
Exactly.
usually, I would even agree that even the most altruistic goals generally have a certain degree of self interest involved in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want equality for everyone, it's usually because you've been on the receiving end of inequality at some point, right? If you want, I mean, like, no exception, right? No exception
Mm-hmm.
here. If you want people to get along and cooperate on climate change, right? It's because you believe that, the world is going to hell and you're going to die. So, to some
Yes.
degree, yeah.
It behooves you to take care of the sphere that you're living on because, well, you know, if you run out of air, you run out of air. That's a problem. The fact that other people run out of air, well, yeah, that's incentive too, but not as bad as you running out of air. That's what motivates most people.
Yep. Yep.
But you just have to convince everybody that it is a problem as well, because some people will deny it. Some people don't believe it'll be a problem for them because, you know, they aren't going to be here in the time that's actually going to be affecting people or them. And it gets complicated.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, can you be altruistic? Can you think about something outside of yourself or people outside of yourself or your direct sphere? Or do you just think about yourself and your immediate sphere?
Good point. Yeah, and that's where empathy comes into play, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
ability to try to see how you would feel if you were in that person's situation or whatever. Yeah. Siobhan says sometimes members of factions don't know the overall scheme either. Yes, the little guy
Well,
does
that's
not
very true.
necessarily know what the leaders of the big group are planning or why they're doing it.
Most don't.
Yeah.
Most would be appalled if they knew.
Yeah, depending on the group, right? Yeah, but yeah, I agree with that. And
Yeah,
also, that means that sometimes when people don't have all the information, they may end up working against the best interests of the group, not realizing they're doing so.
exactly. And I mean, that's where the ignorance comes into place. And that's where you get organizations that suppress all of the information and they don't encourage critical thought and they don't encourage people to look outside of the organization. They want them to stay inside the bubble and, you know, believe what is being told to them, drink the Kool-Aid effectively. That's where you get these soldiers that believe they're doing the right thing and are absolute zealots. And that's where the frightening part comes in, is because they'll do anything because they believe. They believe that they're right, you know, either God is on their side or whatever's on their side. And because of that,
Mhm.
they are empowered to it. It's scary. And communication can't happen between those individuals as well. So if you have something like that going on in your book, you know, it's actually quite a fun thing to play with because you can see this group of people moving forward as a unified force without necessarily comprehending what they're doing.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, Dinosaur Bob says small communes can work because the disgruntled can leave. Countries don't work that way. Angst replies, colonies might, Bob. Yeah, and that's a good
Mm-hmm.
dynamic for space opera. Space
Yep.
is big, so if
Yep.
you have convenient space travel that is not ridiculously expensive and doesn't take millennia to do, then yeah, why would you stick around somewhere you don't like? Just take off and make your own group, right? There's we know now there's planets around pretty much every star, and there's water pretty much everywhere, right?
Yep. There's even water in space. So it's,
And lots of it too, it turns out. Ice water
yep.
is not uncommon at all.
Yep.
So yeah, why would you stay? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just
e-
create a water based fuel and a way of harvesting it on the fly, and you're set.
yeah, Yeah, Esong says, I know people who don't believe in climate change but still support climate change measures because they believe that everyone should be supportive of better air and better water. I think that makes
Yes,
sense.
and that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Bob argues maybe the non players either need to be tolerated and made comfortable or they need a different place to go. Legit ready. Yeah. Dinner is ready, so you have to step out. Have a good night, Esong. And I think actually we are now at 4:30, so it's probably quitting time anyway. If you have any last questions, now the time to ask them. In the meantime, where do we find you online, Jen?
Actually, the place with all of my links, just to make this super simple, would be my website. Which is, I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, I blanked you. Yes, you should put it in the chat because you disappear when I try.
Okay, there we go. That's my website. All of my links are in there. If you go to the menu, it's pretty much close to the top, and you can find me online there. And my books are pretty much everywhere. So books to read, you can find it on whatever your choice is. If you don't like Amazon, you can go to Kobo or whatever. I think I'm pretty much everywhere. Anyway,
I think
yeah,
you are
my
too.
Patreon is there. And what else?
She has awesome stuff for her patrons. I can speak from experience.
Yes, patrons are about to get the official release of my World Anvil mug, which is now no longer in commission. So you're getting one, and the other
Yay!
people are getting one. But what's up for sale is no longer that one. It's a similar design, but it's not the same. So
Ah, nice. Nice,
yeah,
unique stuff.
patrons get official stuff that only they get.
That's
So
awesome. For those who are listening on Lurk or who may have visual issues, the URL is jirogers-author.com for all of Jen's information there. Daz says, uh, do you do streams or chats for bouncing ideas or questions?
I will be doing streams. I will be doing chats. I do have a Discord channel that is grossly underpopulated by comparison to Diane's. So I'm always, you can shoot me a friend request or what have you there. And I will get you hooked up. And yeah, I'm always willing to chat if I'm online. My life circumstances prevent me from being online as much as I'd like to, but I will always answer questions as well.
I'll just quickly put my own Discord in the chat here because I've got an easy macro set up for that, right? Jen is on my Discord if you want to connect with her there, and then she can
Yep.
give you the link to her Discord. And yeah, check it out, guys. Yeah,
Sounds
thanks so
good.
much. Thanks so much
Oh,
for
thank
being
you.
on the show.
That
Yay.
was so much fun. Thank you again.
It's really good to see you. I have missed you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And like virtual hugs.
Yes, virtual hugs, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Who's online right now? I'm sure there's somebody we can raid. There usually is. I'll look at the calendar here and see if I can find anyone. This has been great. Will we do this again? Almost certainly, I would
Oh yeah.
think. Yes, this was a lot of fun. But we already promised we were going to get together in like uh, December at some point and talk about the books that do good world building, right? That we're
Yes.
inspired by. So
I will have a stack.
yeah, me too. Actually, I'll bring one too. It'll be fun. We could chat about it. Oh, I read that one. That was great. Truly my pleasure, guys. Okay, we're gonna raid Black Maggot, aka I think Carol verse now, right? Is it one L or two? Does anyone remember? We'll try one and see if it works. What the hell? Oh, nope, that wasn't the right one. Okay, we'll try two. Don't forget when you get there that our raid shout is prepare to be boarded because we are the Sable's privateers. Ha! There we go. It works. Thank you so much once again for being on the show, Jen. You were awesome, and thanks you guys for tuning in. we will see you. Aaron will, I think we have a writing stream tomorrow. If you want to tune in, it'll be late night. Aaron will be on later on Friday for Ask an Old GM.
Perfect. I will do my best to attend. You know my circumstances,
Yep.
but if I can be here, I will be.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Have a good night, guys. See you
You
later.
too. Thank you, everybody. It was awesome.